proximity as well. There's quite a number of things which overlap between the two. But the Islamic message is quite relentless. One creator, one God Almighty. One day we're all going to die and we're going to be accountable for our actions. And that is the creator we worship. So what we say is God is unlike his creation. So God is not a man, he's not a woman, he's not an idol, he's not a statue. This is a area we've come on which on Sundays is frequented by people who have such conversations. But what we also say is that our creator is unlike his creation, and therefore as being unlike his creation, the creator is the only one worthy of worship. So for example, Jesus, who obviously you'll be familiar with, coming from the US. Yeah. So we believe he's a prophet of God and the messenger of God.
Sure.
A great
Yeah.
And if we read the New Testament in particular, whenever I've read it, it bemuses me to the point of finding it incredulous. Why do Christians assume that he's God when he makes no such statement within the New Testament? Rather, he speaks of one God and worshipping that one God alone. So that's But I mean, obviously, you come from a country which is quite inclined towards a Christian faith, particularly in the south of the US, and they have this odd belief that Jesus is God or an incarnation of God.
Yeah, the incarnate, the Son of God. Yeah.
Sure, but even these titles, which it's like an anomaly of history. Son of God literally means in the Bible one who represents God. That's all it means. It's defined in Matthew chapter 5 verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. There's nothing within the title itself which then equivocates that he is God himself or a divine being. Like the term God the Son, the second person of the Trinity, it's never mentioned of anyone in the New Testament. There's a subtle distinguishing factor, Son of God, and then you look at God the Son. So the term God the Son is never used for anyone. This was a later formulation in Christian history with the Trinity developed. So the Son of God only means one who represents God. So when you focus on the New Testament itself, Christ himself, we believe, may sound perverse, that he's a Muslim. Why is he a Muslim? Because he submits his will to the will of the Almighty God. He says in John 17:3, for this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God. I'm not sure how much you're integrated in the New Testament.
So this is an interesting conversation. I'm going to give you a very hot take that is, I'm going to be very honest, not the most informed. I haven't studied probably to the same level that you have. But I feel like when one gets into the backgrounds of religion, the beliefs of religion, maybe not beliefs of religion, but perhaps the origins, I kind of feel like they're all kind of pointing to the same thing, is kind of what it seems like to me. We might have our different nuances between the origin stories or this, that, and the other, but I kind of feel like it's all pointing to the same thing at the tip top, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that commonality that we can have, that same thing that is pointed to, as you made mention, is the realization from not just Islam or Christianity, but all the world scriptures. They essentially espouse that there is only one God who is unlike his creation. What then happens is that the third-party narratives within these scriptures, then they associate their major protagonists and make them God as opposed to worshipping God.
The actual,
sure. A great example is Christianity, you see. Whereas Christ himself makes no such claims of being divine. However, he's later eulogized in Christian history, and they're reading into verses that which he doesn't claim. So it's like a little study in itself, which once you examine these verses, you come to a conclusion. No, he's not claiming to be God, rather one who represents God in that pretext.
I'm sure that happened because you read the Bible and you see God and Jesus a million different times, or Christ, and so you just start conflating all of those things together, even though they weren't meant to be together. They're
Precisely.
Things. Yeah,
Precisely.
sure.
So in terms of your specific question, you see, in all the world scriptures, they espouse, as I made mention, that God is one. Even in religions which are deemed as idolatrous, for example, Hinduism, which equivocates many beings with God as well. But if you look at the fundamental teachings of their major protagonists, they never invite divinity upon themselves. Rather, they exclaim that there's only one God to whom there is no likeness, even in those scriptures. But what happens, this is where Islam makes a specific boast, if you want to call it, which is coming from God himself, in which it says that in the Quranic narrative there are no contradictions or there are no anomalies you will find. Whereas in the other world scriptures, there tends to be an amalgamation of many different authorships who have written certain of their understandings and have transmitted that into the New Testament. Whereas the Quran claims to be the express, verbatim word of God. No other world scripture makes that claim. So then it deems itself to be challenged. The Quran actually challenges. If you find any discrepancy therein, then see if you can bring out a contradiction. And I know everyone would accept if a book which claims to be from God has a contradiction, then it would necessitate that it can't be from God. So this is the Quranic narrative. One God, unlike his creation, we're all going to perish. We all know that. One day, as they say in this country, we're going to pop our clogs halfway down the giant slalom. It's like a euphemism for skiing, which I'm sure you understand. But yeah, so we're all going to die in that sense. And then we have to be accountable for our actions. I mean, you're obviously coming out and as a human being, you're feeling compelled to participate in this event where such tragedy is taking place in Palestine currently. And, this is what we're all coming together as human beings for, this particular purpose. But then we have to identify if we're all coming for a particular purpose, then there must be a singular being to whom we are going to then be accountable for. So this excellent action you're doing of vocally coming out and showing your support, that is going to be counting in your good deeds, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
It doesn't make sense that we're here for no reason at all. Why is there a creation as opposed to non-creation? Did the universe create itself? Did it come into existence? We can use certain arguments which will give you sound reasoning to believe that there is a creator who plays an active part in our existence. Even though you may ask, well, what's happening in Palestine? Why doesn't the creator do something? The thing is, this is not the land of milk and honey. We're going to die one day, and in the hereafter, there will be the eternal utopia.
So that's the believed land of milk and honey in Islam. Then is like the afterlife, not anywhere here.
That's right. We believe we only have one life.
Yeah.
This is the test. If we're able to adhere to the commandments of the Creator, we will be successful in the hereafter. And then when we try to reason with people who are not Muslims, then we just try for them to understand that understanding. And generally speaking, Islam is much more compatible with this understanding of a unique, singular, independent, necessary being who is unlike his creation, and that by proxy Islam therefore makes more sense, as opposed to other religions which, although they espouse one God, then they become diluted with making creation akin to that creator and worship that creation rather than the creator. So hence, this is what we invite people to, and I've said a bit of a mouthful, but in essence, I hope you've found that informative.
Yeah.
And we're, like I said, the leaflet will give you some further information on Islam. So
yeah, I think the things I know are very, very few, and also very vague, including I think the similarity between Islam and Christianity is that it can be used very perversely and corrupted, and it can be really beautiful if it's if it's rooted in love. So I'm really happy to learn more actual things about it. So I do appreciate
fabulous,
that.
good. Have a good read of that. And there are many websites you can go to, obviously. And what I'd like you to say, you can have the last word. What would you like to say to the people, or to our governments in place who are rather not very much akin in looking at the ceasefire? I read today that Keir Starmer, the head of the Labour Party, the leader of the Labour Party, is not calling for a complete ceasefire. Although people in Scotland with the SNP, I'm not sure how much I'm sure you are. I'm not trying to be condescending.
I'm new here,
so they're calling for a complete ceasefire, but they're trying to suppress it. Well, I think I did find it interesting. This same Labour Party leader, who would be the equivalent of, I think, is it Republicans which are currently in the US? Joe Biden, is he a Republican? Democrat, yeah.
But they're kind of the same thing.
Kind of the same thing. Yeah, exactly. But even he came out a few weeks ago, and he was asking for a two-state solution. But it appears since then he's been summoned by the authorities. They've had a word with him, and all of a sudden he's gone completely the opposite direction.
One-state solution, or
no, not even calling for a ceasefire.
Yeah. Well,
initially, I think some people have had a word with. On the channel I interviewed Jeremy Corbyn about a week or two ago, and I asked him. He was going to be Prime Minister of this country, if you're aware.
Oh, yeah,
but he was hounded out
Yeah.
by the Zionists, you see, because he spoke up for the Palestinian rights, and they just rounded up on him.
Oh, did they? I don't know what kind of caused it down.
Yeah.
But I know that he was the most popular, and then all of a sudden he wasn't.
Yes, and there's a reason for that. It can't just overnight,
No, it's not
all of a sudden the lights are switched off. There was a reasoning behind that. That reasoning is very, very crystal clear, that because he was a human, he was a decent human, spoke up for Palestinian rights, the Zionist press couldn't tolerate it. And you can see on YouTube what they basically say is that the moment you go against us, we will use the anti-Semitic card in the US to spread that. in Europe will accuse you of being Holocaust deniers. So what they'll do, if you go against them, basically they'll round up on you because they've got everything in their grip, you see, in terms of the world and how it is. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. So we're in this vice that they've got us controlled with, you see, which you would agree as a socialist, I'm sure, to some capacity. So there's some of the points. But I'd just like to ask you, I mean, what are your sentiments watching the events occurring in Palestine currently?
What are my sentiments watching the events in Palestine currently? Everything's related. So I firmly believe, the party that I belong to firmly believes that the Palestinian struggle is the queer struggle, is the working class struggle. It's all connected. Fighting for one is fighting for all of them. And I strongly think that, kind of related to what we're talking about with government, that government's not going to solve this. I strongly believe that the working class can. We uphold the system. If we withdraw our labor, that has immense impact and that has immense influence. So I firmly believe in the working class, and I firmly believe in Palestinian right to self-determination. I believe in anyone's right to self-determination across any and all demographics. So I don't think it's just happening in a vacuum. I don't think it's unrelated to other world events, what's happening in the Congo, all of those things.
Interesting. So, I mean, we have certain moral guides that we live by, which invoke the way one lives in terms of male and female. So you're probably aware of these, coming from a Christian background as well. So what we then say, God is the sole arbitrator of objective morality. He decides, the Creator decides, what is deemed as moral and immoral. He's the overall, if you want to call it, like for example, in this country 60 years ago, up until 1968, homosexuality was illegal.
Yeah.
But then it became legal. Now, incest, for example, is illegal currently, and many people will turn their nose up on such a suggestion, deeming it immoral. If you look at homosexuality and compare and contrast that to incest, the analogies are very similar. If two consenting adults want to do something and they're brother and sister, they're not harming anyone, what's the issue?
I think the issue would be on like any genetic outcome that would happen. Any life that would be born would be struggling, is more likely to be born with genetic mutation or anything like that.
So what if you agree to have things such as, a lady can, just go on the pill, or she can have her tubes tied, as an example. If she loves someone, like her, just say her sibling, so much, and if this is the case, it's not always the case that offspring then have debilitating diseases, although some studies have shown that, but it's not overwhelmingly, I don't believe it's the consensus, although you're quite correct in saying this. However, if this is the case and they say, okay, just in case we have offspring which may have certain deformities, then we'll agree not to have children. So in those circumstances, where do we lie, you see? What is the benchmark of what is deemed as moral and immoral?
I would challenge maybe that there's a lot of consenting adults, because much of incest comes from molestation or pedophilia as well. So I would maybe challenge that a little bit, that a norm would be it's two consenting adults and two consenting adults. I would challenge each of those statements, like each part of that statement. As a queer person myself, I will always see a distinction in that. So I don't know if God made me this way, then why would they do that if this is wrong?
So if God's made you, so you have certain inclinations and certain, what you call, certainly you're inclined towards something more than something else, you see. But we have then a understanding that you can then resist certain things which are palpably uncertain, in the sense that you may think, okay, this is where I'm inclined towards, and hence I should do, and I should go with my inner nature. But these things can also be pretty much subjective as well, you see. I mean, for example, if you take a particular liking to a female as an example, then it doesn't necessitate that then that relationship has to be physical, if you see what I mean. It could simply mean...
Why can't it?
Because in essence, we need to have an understanding of what is deemed as morality, you see. What is objective. Now, for example, I gave you a really good example, I thought, of incest. And in effect, if you look at the similarities between the two, you shouldn't have any issue with incest either. If two consenting, mature 18-year-old, just say the male is 22, the girl is 20, they're not harming anyone, which is what the people of same-sex disposition, say, they've agreed not to have children just in case of this. So how then we distinguish? I'm assuming you find. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you find incestual relationships unacceptable?
Well, then let's chase that down then a little bit. So you're saying it's not harming anyone. Two consenting adults. It's an act made in love. Then why is God against me having sex with a woman?
No, God is not against you. You see, what it is, if you have certain.
Why doesn't God approve of it?
So because God has made certain objective morality which He has deemed as acceptable and unacceptable. So, for example, I could be, for example, would be rather inclined towards sexual addiction, but that doesn't mean then I find everyone who I can possibly get hold of and then espouse my my physicality, if you see what I mean. That doesn't necessarily that I do that, but I could in theory do that, and then therefore where does the moral paradigm come from? And then I think what I was trying to seek from this particular point I was raising was there needs to be some sort of level of consistency. So if we're going to say that, okay, homosexuality is acceptable or LGBTQ or queer are acceptable, but then you're going to say no, incest is not acceptable. But the analogies are very similar. You see, there's nothing intrinsically
similar, but they're quite different, aren't they?
How?
Well, one is with a family member, leading to issues. One is with not a family member. It's just somebody of the same sex.
Yeah. So issue. I mean, when we talk about issue, why should there be an issue? Because the overall understanding would be not that I'm trying to corner you. I'm just making an understanding. If they're adults and they're consent and they love each other, okay, more so than a normal sibling relationship, what is intrinsically wrong with it? Just saying.
What's intrinsically wrong with two men loving each other?
Yeah. So that but do you mind if you just answer that first question of mine? Then I'll come on to you.
Answering.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not trying to make. Yeah, that's fine.
So the thing is, I think this is actually what quite led me away from religion. One of the things is that I don't think you can just point to something and say like bad. And you're saying like if you're going to point to one thing bad, it needs to all be bad. I get that perspective from you. However, I don't abide by somebody else's moral code. I live my life in love. I live my life in abundance. I love my partner immensely. I would do anything for them, and I think that can be true. And so I think the moral code against queer people, amongst other things, I think is something that really led me away from any and all religion, not just Christianity. I think
religion in general.
I think if it points all to the same thing, I think, all right, well, all of these things exclude me, and that's fine.
It's not necessarily exclusion. It's more, how Islam is slightly different. Sure. It's that if you're inclined as such, you see, there has to be a compass. Like, I wasn't trying to corner you by saying to you about the incestual side of things. All I was want you to do, because
I think you're comparing queer people to incestual people, which is actually quite an interesting thing, because originally in the Bible, it was man shall not lay with boy, and that was later changed to man shall not lay with man, which are two very wildly different statements. And so I think it's kind of
Genesis,
the same thing, isn't it? Yeah. So it's a little disheartening to hear that, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, so again, you see, so what the general understanding is, God is the overall decider what is objectively moral and immoral. He's the arbitrator.
Objectively being the key word here, I think.
Yes, absolutely key word.
I think that's maybe where our differences are, is objective versus what I'm saying. I think that's a bit subjective, person to person, which is unfortunate because some people take a subjective view of queer people being immoral, and I think queer people are some of the most wonderful, loving, joyous people I've ever met, who have so much in common with people like Palestinians who have experienced oppression. And so I think it's really sad that those two parties can't come together because of something.
See, would you say, it's interesting you made, sorry to interrupt, you made that comment as an analogy to the Palestinian people, but with you, I'm not trying to corner you, please don't think so. But you said at the same time that it's not analogous to then compare queer people with people of the incestual relationship. But in this instance, I don't want me to make you feel upset. I'm just making you realise that there's got to be some sort of consistency. That if on one hand you've said that queer people is not non-analogous with incestual relationship, then but by the same proxy you said queer people have something analogous to the Palestinian people, i.e. oppression, or as you've deemed it. So that in itself seems to be a little bit paradoxical, but not that I am making judgment upon you. So what we say, for example, what we would say as an example in your situation, as Muslims, we would say that if you're inclined towards someone of opposite sex, as long as you don't then do the physical acts, which are then,
I'm going to do the physical acts.
yeah, I mean that's fine. So, like I said, I mean, in the sense that this is something that will be between you and your Creator. Then this is what we believe. So we're not here. We're not going to say. We're not going to judge you. We're not going to say, oh, these people are terrible. They're the worst people on the planet.
No, you may not, but then you also don't believe in my right to do what I want to do, and I believe in your right to do what you want to do. And herein lies a really unfortunate disconnect. I will always fight for you and your rights to believe what you believe. And it sucks that can't be returned all of the time, and I do it anyway because this is the right thing to do. To me, this is the subjective, to hopefully many the objective right thing to do, is to fight for you, to fight for Palestinians, to fight for every person.
So what?
Right.
So what? So what?
That.
You shouldn't be. You know what? For example,
But you're telling me I don't have almost like a right to exist. I can't.
No, I'm not saying that either. What I'm saying, for example, just say a mob of right-wingers who have, as you're probably aware, will be attending this.
Have to get back to my table,
I'll be just a few seconds.
Sure.
Just say we get a group of right-wingers who, like a right-wing mob, who decide to attack you because of your sexuality. We will be first there to defend you.
I don't see. I don't know
see,
if that's been the experience.
No, but we want, for example, if that happened and you're a person who we believe, you got that understanding of your Creator, and that you're not privy to being tortured or bulldozed away, you see. So if this does happen, if some right wingers who are led to believe have already caused some nuisance at this particular gathering,
yeah.
I mean, that's why I was informed. If they come to, we would be in there defending you, just as a human being, as a human being. See,
I would love that.
but you see, this is where we differ in terms of our moral code, as we define that by our Creator. So. What I hope, we can perhaps watch the conversation later, and I hope you don't feel in any way, what you call upset in anything that I may have said, which I think you probably are, to be honest.
Because I think if you say I love you, but I don't love the fact that you're bisexual, then you don't love me. You love the idea of me.
So what I would say to that is that, again, we take our credence from a Creator who we deem is the moral objective. But I think that would negate that point that I wouldn't. If someone try to attack you, I would defend.
I'm here for that.
So I would literally, put myself in the line to defend you.
Thank you.
But
Likewise.
but at the same juncture, that is the belief that we have. You see, and we would give you kind advice on that. But that's it. You see, we wouldn't I wouldn't say that you're a terrible person. No, I wouldn't say that at all, because God knows the truth. You see, so on that basis, this is where we put, and I'm being very honest. I could literally, because we had a very pleasant conversation, I could really say whatever to appease you, but I'm just saying this is where the Islamic moral code comes from. But I hope that softens the somewhat feeling that you may have, that if someone came to attack you just because of then we would defend you. No doubt about that whatsoever.
Yeah. Which I fully appreciate, and I do appreciate that.
Okay, good. I mean, hopefully we're somewhat different from other people, but that would be the case. Anyway, I really appreciate your time and your sentiments. You're very kind for giving me your time, and I'm really, honestly, I was not here to upset you in any way, shape, or form. And if you do feel like that, it's just that we come from a certain moral compass, and I hope those latter words which I spoke would make you think, oh no, they're not too bad, or they don't agree with us. Fair enough, we can have that difference, and at the same time, if such an event did occur, we'll be there to protect you.
Likewise.
Okay, thank you so much. See, as Muslim,
what do you do? I don't know.
See, what it is, we just say thank you to you, because we've got. That's another thing. You see, it's a very interesting point we never mentioned. Even a lady who is, married, for example, we as Muslims, we don't shake hands with the opposite sex. Now that may sound so primitive, and oh my God, they can't even shake hands with a woman; they're going to be electrocuted or something. But the point is that we have, again, that's another moral conduct that we do, that for our non-relatives, they're called, in the Arabic, it's called mahram, like your mother, your sister, your daughter. These are the type of people where you don't have a certain covering over. But anyone else, whoever they are, we're not supposed to be physical or only show in that, but we can also be always very pleasant and converse.
Thank you then, or do
No,
I
of course
say-
you can. No, you can
Okay,
say
cool.
absolutely. It's just the this is the handshake, which is the thing. That again, you may think that's primitive, and a lot of people do make that complaint. Well, I mean, come on, Muslims, wait, we live in the 21st century.
That's your belief. That's your belief. And
Yes.
it has no harm to me. So.
Fantastic. And it's something which is also, by the way, this is what the Jews in their halakha law, that they also have this understanding of non-touching of opposite sex. But that's just something which is just out of interest. But like I said, I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and I hope that you don't feel in any way like, because the latter points that I made, I hope they somehow, make a congeniality in the discussion that we've had.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care. Wa alaikum salam. So that was a rather, interesting end to the conversation that we've had, and we've got to be very careful, and even though we don't agree with the LGBTQ, that we don't upset people intrinsically in their, in what they have understood, because this is their life choices, their life experiences that they've had, and it's a very tricky way not to upset someone in that sense. Although I did speak the truth and I came out and said what I had to say, because this is the law of Allah. There's no hiding the law of Allah Azza wa Jal. So may Allah, guide us all and make this lady think as well. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.